Meeting of the HOC's Budget, Finance, and Audit Committee on April the 23rd, 2025. I'm Roy Priest, the chair of the committee. I'm joined in the diocese, Paul Weech, and also remotely by Commissioner Jeffrey Merkowitz. We formed the committee for this specific Budget, Finance, and Audit Committee. So I'm going to start with asking for approval of the minutes of our meeting of February the 28th. So I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes of February 28th. Can I have a second?
Second.
Probably moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed is nay. So ordered. The first item to come before us today will be the fiscal year 2025 third quarter budget amendment. And I will turn to our President, Chelsea Andrews.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, the public, and the HOC team. This item, commissioners, is a standard housekeeping item when we purchase a property and transition that property into our fiscal year budget. And in this case, we are requesting support to do so for a property that we acquired by the name of Battery Park. That's in Bethesda. It's a preservation property. And we're taking the next steps to properly reflect it in our books. I will turn it over to our CFO, Tim Getzinger, and our budget officer, Terry Fowler, to provide more detail.
Thank you, President Andrews, commissioners. Again, for the record, Tim Getzinger, Senior VP of Finance and CFO. I don't have a lot more to add other than, yes, this is a standard item. We are adding the property Battery Park into the fiscal year budget, and presenting this item will be Terry Fowler, our budget officer.
Thank you. Good afternoon, commissioners, President Andrews, viewing public, and HOC staff. Battery Park was acquired on October 22nd of 2024. I do want to note that this is the last three remaining naturally affordable properties on Bethesda Battery Lane. And this budget serves to incorporate a budget for the period of November through June of 2025. Just one correction, the total units for this property is 256 units. It was erroneously kept a unit count from a previous packet. So there are 256 units at this property, which is managed by Residential One. The budget is projecting a cash flow of approximately $1.42 million for that period of time. However, staff is recommending that 25% or approximately 356 be restricted to the property to allow for uncertainty that can occur during the first year of operations. In addition to the unrestricted cash flow of approximately $1.07 million, HOC will receive an asset management fee in an amount of approximately $94,000 from the property to support agency overhead. As you look at the chart, it reflects the total budget for the November through June period. And you can see the unrestricted cash of just over $1 million. There's also a capital budget of approximately $74,000 for typical capital costs. The impact of the budget amendment serves as a surplus of $1.16 million. The projected draw from the general fund operating reserve will be reduced by that amount to return to a balanced budget. However, it's important for us to realize that the actual position at year end is subject to change. That is, the budget and actual position at year end will be based on the performance across the fiscal year for our property portfolio, as well as the timing of commitment and development fee receipts. I'd be happy to address any questions you may have.
Members of the committee have any questions?
I had just a couple of quick questions. On the budget, I just noticed that there was $0 for tenant services. Are we not providing any services to the tenants in this property?
There are no services charged to the tenant. It does not reflect services that may be provided and funded from other sources, such as the county budget. but there are no
Gotcha.
direct charges
Oh.
to the property for the budget for this period.
Okay. Okay. And then just a technical one, there's a reference to an attachment, 1-2 under capital budget amendments, and I didn't see any attachment.
Okay, that should be that. It's actually within the packet. We will amend that for the packet that goes to the full commission.
Okay, thanks.
Seeing no other questions, can I get a motion to recommend this forward to the full commission for action? Properly moved and
Second.
second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
The motion is carried. The next item that comes before us is a presentation of our fiscal year 2026 general fund. And I will turn to our president.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioners, this is the first of a multi-series process that you will go on with us as we present various portions of this budget for fiscal year 26. Today, we will start with two of the funds, the general fund as well as the public fund. And the general fund, as outlined in the materials that you received, typically operate at a deficit, but are a reflection of our operations that are funded through various sources. Our budget officer, Terry Fowler, will walk us through how we go about budgeting for our general fund and what some of those expenditures are. I will just note that in each of the presentations and the materials that are provided, we always start with reminding ourselves and the public as it pertains to what our North Star is. And here we're focused on ensuring that we're able to accomplish our strategic goals. We highlight the three key components of our strategic plan and all of the recommendations that will be advanced to the commission over the next few months will really ensure alignment with satisfying those goals, to expand affordable housing, to enhance the lives we touch, and to excel as a world-class organization. And so I will turn it over to Terry Fowler to present the recommendations related to the general fund. Oh, I will first turn it over to Tim Getzinger to provide a prelude for Terry Fowler.
Sorry. Thank you, President Andrews and commissioners. Again, for the record, Senior VP Tim Getzinger, CFO of HOC. Just wanted to remind the commission and the public where we are in terms of the process. Earlier this month, we provided the president's recommended budget. Later, we provided the commission and the public with the recommended budget book. We have 5 funds. Today, we will be reviewing the general fund and the public fund. And then later on May 8th, we will be reviewing the 2 bond funds that we have, the single family, the multifamily bond fund, as well as where our properties sit, which is our opportunity housing fund. And then in June, we will be presenting the approved budget for commission adoption. So I just wanted to go over those particular housekeeping items before we delve into this item. And presenting this will be, again, Terry Fowler, our budget officer.
Thank you, Tim. Again, Terry Fowler, Budget Officer of HOC. As mentioned in today's meeting, we're going to review the FY 2026 recommended budget and inform the committee of any changes before we present in June for adoption. If we can move to the page 6 of the packet. Again, this chart depicts the recommended budget that was presented on April 2nd to the commission of approximately $375.9 million that was balanced with a projected draw of approximately $1.9 million from the general fund operating reserve. And today we will be focusing on the general fund that is shaded in blue. If we can move to slide 3 on page 7 of the packet. Could we move to slide 3 on page 7 of the packet? Thank you. This chart reflects the source of the funds received in the general fund. Fees for agency overhead that are charged to our revenue generating departments are approximately $15.17 million, or 47.52% of the income in the general fund. Development corporation fees, which are expenses charged to our development corporations. It's a mechanism of taking the unrestricted cash from those properties. That is budgeted at $4.42 million, or 12.99% in our budget. Depicted in the gray shaded area are the fees for service that are generated by our real estate and mortgage finance divisions of approximately $7.69 million, or 22.59% of the budget. Because we budget by fund, we have both transfers in and transfers out between our funds. And you'll see in the general fund that we have transfers in revenue of approximately $2.62 million, or 7.71% of the budget. The FHA risk sharing is the income that comes from the properties that are financed under that program. It shows as income of approximately $1.02 million, or just under 3% in the general fund. And on the next slide, you'll see the corresponding restriction of those funds to the reserve in the same amount. Other miscellaneous income is approximately $235,000, or 0.69%. And finally, the projected draw from the general fund operating reserve to balance the budget of approximately $1.9 million is 5.51% of the income. Could we move to the next slide on page 8 of the packet? This pie chart reflects the distribution of expenses by accounting group and is broken into the operating and non-operating expenses. Personnel costs, which is consistently the largest expense in the general fund, is $26.62 million, or just under 73%. Operating fees, which includes audit fees, building rent, bank fees, vehicle rents, and are approximately $1.09 million, for 3.11%. Administrative operating costs are approximately $4.12 million, or 11.71%. The other operating, which includes tenant services, our security costs, utilities, and insurance, is budgeted at $975,000, or 2.78%. And maintenance expenses for our central offices, as well as our contractual costs in IT, are approximately $1.75 million, or 4.97%. Finally, the non-operating expenses on the right side of the page are comprised of the contributions to the FHA risk sharing reserve mentioned previously, a portion of the funding for our IT and facility costs, debt service payments, contributions to our replacement reserves as well for capital for IT and facilities. And this totals approximately $1.6 million, or 4.57%. If we can move to the next page, page 9, this chart depicts the general fund operating reserve and reflects the plans for both fiscal 25 and fiscal 26. For fiscal 25, there are sources totaling approximately $532,000. That is an estimate of the projected interest income that will be earned on the balance of the fund. The uses in fiscal 25 total approximately $1.4 million. They include a draw to fund the Metro Point operating deficit from fiscal 24 that had not yet been taken of approximately $116,000, as well as the projected deficit for Metro Point of $28,000 for 25, and the previous anticipated draw from the reserve for the 25 operating budget of $1.27 million. For fiscal 26, We are estimating again the projected interest income, which has been maintained at the level of 532,000 from 25, but will depend on the balance and rates offered during that year. And the projected uses at this time for fiscal 26 include a projected deficit of approximately $7,000 for Metro Point and the anticipated draw of 1.874 million for balancing the 26 budget. The net effect is a projected decrease of approximately 886,000 in 25 and a decrease of approximately 1.35 million in fiscal 26, with a projected balance of $13.5 million for June 2026, which is 7.7% of our adjusted operating budget. The adjusted operating budget, as you can see on the bottom of the page, is calculated by removing the housing assistance payments, our other federal and county grants, as well as the bond funds. It is also worth noting that an earmark for a one-year headquarter debt service reserve was established. And if we were to take into account this restriction, the unobligated balance of the general fund operating reserve would be approximately 5% of the adjusted operating budget. If we can move to the final page in the packet, thank you. This chart depicts the fiscal 2026 capital budget for our facilities and our IT department, totaling $663,000, up from the budgeted amount of $572,000 for fiscal 25. The facilities and IT budgets are projected to be funded by replacement reserves of approximately $294,000 and restrictions in the operating budget of $205,000. This concludes the general fund portion of the presentation. And thus far, we have not introduced any changes to the recommended budget. However, I will be happy to address any questions you may have before we move on to the public fund.
Are there any questions from committee members for the discussion around the general fund?
No, not here.
Yeah, a couple quick questions. Could you just talk about the relationship between, on chart 4, the funding for capital and the capital budget, I guess, or I was trying to understand the relationship there. If those are connected in any way, or what's different about that capital?
This chart is depicting the total capital budget in the first column of $663,000. The two columns to the right are showing you how that budget is being funded.
Oh, I see. Okay, so it's the 294.
Right, and the
then
369 is coming from the replacement reserves that exist.
But then we're adding 200,000 to the replacement?
Yes, so the budget for fiscal 26, as previous budgets, does include a contribution of $100,000 for IT and $100,000 for facilities. Those contributions have been taken into consideration when we determined how much additional funding would be required from the operating budget. So what that means is that,
I mean, we're adding 100,000 to the replacement reserves for IT while taking out 104,000. Am I misunderstanding that?
the contributions that will be made in 26 will be part of the funding towards the cost in 26. In other words, what we are contributing is fully obligated to meet the needs of 26. So the monies will be set aside and then used for the 26 expenditures. And beyond that amount, there is an additional $294,000 that is needed to fund the capital expense that are budgeted here.
Yeah, I guess, I don't know, maybe I'm not following it completely.
So the 104 that you're referencing, sure. The 104 that you're seeing here means that when we enter into fiscal 26, we will have a remaining balance in the reserve of approximately $4,000 for IT. We'll be using that 4,000 plus the contributions made in 26. So we will be fully spending down the reserve. And on top of that, we are going to have to restrict an additional 117,000 in the operating budget for 26 to fully cover the projected cost of 221.
But is there a reason we send it through the replacement reserve rather than just sending it straight to the operating budget?
It's just the way that reserves are funded. The reality, it's the same thing can happen in a property that you have your monthly contributions being made, but then you are expending and getting a reimbursement from the reserve. It is really just flowing through the reserve, but it is not increasing the future balance of the reserve because it's used to meet the current year needs.
Okay. It just seems like we're moving it around in different pockets. So, and then the only other, just a comment, I guess, was that on chart 5 for the 1% operating reserve threshold. I know, we've talked in the past about revisiting that threshold. And I think if I remember correctly, it was that we decided not to do that while we were in deficit mode. But I think there was some question at the time about, whether 1% was the right number.
I'm sure. I think that staff agrees with that assessment. The current policy is the 1%, but we are aiming for a goal of 10%. But you're absolutely right. Given the current economic status, reaching that goal would be quite difficult. We're only here, providing what that 1% would look like.
Yeah. Okay. No other questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just under the maintenance allocation for, it includes funding for the new headquarters.
Yes, it does. So there is a partial year in the budget for this Kensington office, and then the headquarters will pick up after the move, which is like around mid-fiscal year.
Yeah.
So yes, we have a partial budget for the Kensington office and a partial budget to pick up at the headquarters once the move is first.
Do you contemplate there will be more or less in terms of maintenance expenses related to that new headquarters building compared to what we are spending now in Kensington?
Well, I mean, the size of the building alone, so whether it's more, if you take it by the square foot, I think it's going to be a more efficient building, but it is a multi-floor building.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that it's new, hopefully that will cut down some of what we have to deal with here.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. And the other thing I'll just as a point of note, under the where we've been carrying deficits on Metro Point in the past, and therefore projected for 2026 is only $6,594. I just said that's really a great example of sharpening the pencil.
Yeah, the deficit has come down significantly from earlier years where it was close to $500,000. So the operations hasn't improved over the years, and the required contribution for the deficit has decreased.
Yeah, good thing. The questions, this is not something that requires us to vote. This is a presentation, so it's just been presented to the committee. And so with that, I want to thank you for the presentation on the general fund. And we'll now move to the next presentation, which is around the public fund. So I'll turn to you, President.
Yes, thank you. Commissioners, the public fund specifically focuses in on the funding that we receive from our federal and county partners. And as you will see in this presentation, reflects our estimates based on the information that we have to date. And I will turn it over to our finance team to provide further detail.
Thank you, President Andrews. With me today to present the public fund is Kim Pleasant. She is one of the financial analysts in the budget office. And this is her area of expertise in the budget office. So she will be presenting this packet to you. And I turn it over to Kim.
Good afternoon, Commissioners, President Andrew, HOC staff, and Public Fund. Can we move on to slide 1 of page 6 of the report? Thank you. That's page 2. Okay. So today we're going to cover the 2026 recommended public fund. The agency fiscal year recommended budget as presented to the Commission on April 2nd was approximately $375.9 million and has not changed based on the general fund presentation. The presentation will be focusing on the public fund shaded in blue, which includes the housing choice voucher, which represents approximately 41% of the total agency budget, and other federal and county grants, which we will discuss further in the future slides. If we can move to slide 3 on page 8, please. This chart is showing a 5-year history of the Housing Choice Voucher Program, or the HCVP, including a summation of changes made to the FY 2026 recommended budget to the FY 26 revised budget. We can see changes from FY 2025 amended to FY 2026 recommended. The HAP funding increased by $12.07 million, or 9.4%. Our administrative fees increased by $239,000, or 2%. The miscellaneous income decreased by $8.7 thousand, or 4.8%. The personal expenses increased by $267,000, or 3.3%. The operating fee expense decreased by $80,000, or 2.5%. Operating administrative expenses increased by $158,000, or 10.5%, and the HAP expenses increased by $15.4 million, or 12.2%. We will now go through the changes from the FY 2026 recommended budget to the FY 26 revised budget. The revised budget was based on the increase in the end of participation EOPs during the first quarter of the calendar year 2025, which reduced overall utilization, a small reduction in the projected number of emergency housing vouchers, or EHV, based on recent utilization, countered by a small increase in projected utilization of the MOD rehab vouchers. As a result, the HAP funding decreased by $666,000, or 0.5%. The administrative fees decreased by $44,000, or 0.4%. The operating fee expenses increased by $93.4 or 3.1%, and the HAP expenses decreased by $842,000, or 0.6%. The net effect results are a decrease in the draw from the HAP reserves known as net restricted position, or NRP, of $176,000, and the increase in the projected draw from the administrative reserves unrestricted net position, or UMP, of $138,000. This resulted in a net projected draw from the NRP of $766,000 and a projected draw from the UMP of $711,000. Can we move to slide 4 on page 9? Thank you. The distribution of the non-HAP expenses, which are funded by administrative fees received for this program, is as follows. Personnel totaled 8.26 million or 63%. Operating fees totaled 3.15 million or 24%. And other administrative expenses totaled 1.66 million or 13%. Can we move to slide 5 on page 10? This is our grant overview. This chart shows a 5-year history of federal grants. The federal funding, excluding the Housing Choice Voucher Program previously discussed, increased by 1.06 million or 18.2% from the FY 2025 amended budget to the FY 2026 recommended budget based on the following. The Fatherhood Program grant is in its 5th year of a 5-year period annual funding of $998,000. The McKinney grant budget assumes a $5.25 million budget, an increase of 1.03 million of 24.5% from what we received in FY 2025. The Ross grant assumes a budget of $598,000, reflecting an increase of $23,000 or 4% to support a larger portion of existing work years. Can we move to slide 6 on page 11? This chart is another 5-year history of the county grants. The county funding increased by $878,000 or 6.9% from the FY 2025 amended budget to the FY 2026 recommended budget based on the following. The county grant increased by $758,800 or 9.1%. The closing cost funds has decreased by $9,900 or 4.6%. And the McKinney funding increased by $19,900 or 2.6%. Funding for the recordation tax funded programs was increased by 3%. Miscellaneous funding increased $7,800 or 2%. Slide 7, please, on page 12. This chart represents the FY 2026 agency revised operating budget, summarizing changes made today. We begin with a balanced budget using our reserves. The reserve budget now shows a surplus of $93,409 based on the increase in management fees paid from the Housing Choice Voucher to the general fund for overhead expenses, It is worth noting that the net effect of changes in the Housing Choice Program were balanced by adjustments to the budgeted draw from the HAP and administrative reserves for the program costs. Staff will present recommendations for any surplus or deficits at the May 8th BF&A meeting. I'm happy to take any questions if you all have time.
I have a question having to do with the emergency housing vouchers. And, in the packet, it says that EHV funding is anticipated to continue through calendar year 2026. I'm wondering if that feels like a safe assumption, given the projections that it's going to run out of money during this calendar year, or by 2026.
Commissioner Markowitz, we did receive notification from HUD as it pertains to the EHV and reconciliation, another reconciliation notice that we actually just received this morning as well. Our understanding is that the funding for EHV will go until 26, whereas previously it was slated to continue until 2030. We're in the process of closely looking at the notice to evaluate whether we can easily transfer those participants into the federal voucher program if we will need to, which I believe we'll probably have to pursue an administrative plan change to give a priority for those families. But we are advancing this particular budget at this moment based on the information we have to date. We need to look closer at the notice that HUD produced this morning as well with regards to reconciliation. And if there are any changes that we need to make in terms of our forecasting between now and when the final budget is advanced, we will highlight that we're making those recommended changes, the reason why, and the latest information we're relying on at that time.
Yeah, no, I think that's appropriate. Did the communication suggest that it would be through calendar year 26 or that it would end sometime in 26?
It was through calendar year 26.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, no, the news reports I had seen had suggested earlier, but I don't know whether it's reassuring or not to hear something from HUD right now, but yes, agree that if I think we need to take a close look at that and determine whether any adjustments are necessary to the budget. I'd like to be as conservative as possible with this.
Right. I will just say that even if we have to make a budget adjustment because we're no longer receiving the funds from our federal partner in the manner in which they've allocated these particular vouchers, we would be seeking to repurpose those families in the overall voucher program. And so it would be a budget amendment to reflect that that funding source isn't coming, but we would still ensure that those families are.
How many families are
No,
talking?
yeah, we definitely don't want to pull the rug out from under those families. So
My understanding is we have approximately, the last time I heard was
89.
89. I was going to
Yeah.
say 90 families.
When we prepared this, it was 90. I believe it's gone down to 89. And obviously there's no reissuance of those vouchers. So as families leave that program, then the participants would go down.
Are there any other questions?
Yeah, my questions were related, though, going bigger even. That as I was reading through the grant funds and the public funds, it feels to me like there's an awful lot of uncertainty about federal policy in general. And the problem is that our fiscal year doesn't start till June and theirs starts in October. And I heard you say, Madam President, that, we take the best information we got now and budget accordingly. But in preparing our budget, how much do we, in the background, kind of stress what would happen if, right? The kind of risk management. What if there are some of the major changes to the housing choice voucher program that have been leaking into the press recently, or
Just New York Times just this last weekend.
yeah,
Right.
or even the big increase. We have a fairly big increase in the budget here for our McKinney grant, which also would be exposed to appropriation risk starting October 1st. And again, best information's here, but to what extent do we in the background look and say, if this happens, we'll have to do X?
Some of the grants we've already received our funding notice, and they will not rescind. For example,
So this year's money, but a contract extending beyond the end of the fiscal year.
right. And I'm certain Terry could also provide more context, but for funds like the NOFO that we respond to for McKinsey, there's a year differential sometimes before you actually receive or draw down. So I'll let you respond to that, but let me respond to the larger question first. And that is in terms of how we stress test and look at our ability to continue these programs without the funding. The truth is we have a certain amount of reserves and we have a certain amount of time frame allowable where we would have to consider how to wind down and or work with our county partners. We have been in conversation with the county. I sit on the ICH board along with other representatives, Davita Rowley from our resident services team. We have had conversations with them about where we stand right now with our current federal allocations. But if there is a major change in the voucher program, there will be a major impact on this county. And the agency, HOC, does not have the capacity to fund 9,000 plus households. And it is the true reality. We've explored what would happen if funding declines. Typically what happens in that case is a resetting in terms of how many call-ups we make. We allow attrition to happen naturally. We try to think through how we can potentially utilize reserves to the best of our ability. But ultimately, if there is a serious sunset of this program, it will have a significant impact, and the agency is not postured for any long period of time to be able to address that.
Yeah. Yeah, certainly in the publications that have been sort of tracking this kind of budget situation going on, there was an article talking about the devastating impact of totally defunding the housing choice voucher program. You know, I mean, I forgot the numbers, millions of people who are depending upon the housing choice voucher program. I mean, it's the largest really program financially that HUD administers. And I don't know, I think that I just think that there may be some reduction in funding, but I do not see it being eliminated. I don't think there is the wherewithal politically to accept that many people.
Well, and I'd say
Yeah.
there's also the significant funding on the landlords. And the full expectation is that the private sector will weigh in on this. If a landlord had multiple contracts for the voucher program that's no longer being funded, imagine the amount of mortgages that will be going into default and loans that won't be paid. And we all know, unfortunately, we're way too familiar with how long it takes to go through an eviction process. So a landlord would expect at least 9 to 12 months before they could even reconsider an appropriate response in terms of getting their unit back leased up. So this is definitely going to be an area that we will closely monitor. We do believe that because of the fact that there are private interests as well as public interests, that hopefully this program will be spared.
Yeah. I mean, if the secretary restores Section 4 funding, I don't see how he can not wrestle with the impact of the housing choice voucher program. Goodness gracious.
And Mr., I agree with your political analysis, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
And because it is the biggest expenditure at HUD, it will be a target at the margins for ways in which they can economize and cut back on the budget. So we need to keep watching appropriately.
Right.
Yeah. No other questions? I want to thank the staff for the presentation and to welcome you aboard.
Thank you very much.
Staff. And we hopefully your first visit with us has not been too bad. We want you to stay around.
Yeah, we do. Yeah. And I just want to add that we have introduced changes to date. However, specifically Montgomery County is going through their council reviews. And if any changes occur to the funding, either down or up of any of the grants we presented here, we will introduce that change and reconcile the budget between the recommended and adopted when we come back with a proposed budget in June. And as Tim mentioned earlier, on May 8th, we will be discussing the mortgage finance and real estate development divisions, as well as our opportunity housing portfolio and the OHRF.
Thank you.
And I thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next item to come before us is extension of a property management contract for the laureate. I will turn to our president.
Yes, commissioners, you should have also received an updated version of this packet in hard copy. Commissioner Merkowitz, an updated version, just more information, actually. No changes substantively, but just additional background information that we thought would be helpful, both for the commission as well as the public as it pertains to the laureate. In this item that we're advancing, we are requesting committee support to renew our contract with Bozzuto Management. I will note that this is a contract that has lapsed and due to an administrative oversight was delayed in being advanced to the commission. We have gone back to confirm that we do not have any other properties in this posture. As the commission may recall, we undertook a pretty ambitious approach to our property management contracts, bringing multiple tranches, and there are, I believe, two, this and the Leggett, that are not in this larger groupings, and therefore this property we did not realize that the contract lapsed, but we are definitely tracking now, and that will not happen again. We do feel confident in the property management services that we are receiving, which is why we are feel good about moving forward with this request. I will turn it over to our Vice President of Property Management, Ali Ozier, to provide more details.
Thank you, President Andrews. Good afternoon, Commissioners. For the record, Ali Ozier, Vice President of Property Management. I'm here to present to you the proposal for a procurement of property management services and the renewal of the property management agreement for the Laureate with Bozzuto Management Company. Staff is recommending that we renew the management agreement for the Laureate, which expired on October 31st of last year. As per the President Andrews stated, there was a oversight, and however, there is currently an agreement in place with Bozzuto Management to continue to render management services to the property in accordance with the original management agreement, which they are doing so. Bozzuto has managed the property for the last 2 years. The property is currently 96% occupied. It is in compliance for its HIF and MPDU units. The management team has also shown a strong commitment to resident engagement, as evidenced by the tenant surveys that we recently launched, and the feedback that we received from this property was great from the tenants who did respond. Therefore, or actually the next slide, the following table identifies the annual cost of the contract and the time period of the renewal. The cost of the contract is approximately $181,000, which is 3% of adjusted gross receipts. The proposed renewal period would be from November 1st, 2024 through October 31, 2025. Therefore, the staff is the renewal of the property management contract will not have an adverse impact on the calendar 25 operating budget, as the costs associated with the services are already in the property budget. Therefore, the staff is recommending that the Budget, Finance, and Audit Committee join the staff's recommendation that the Commission approve the renewal of the property management services contract with Bozzuto for the Laureate, and for formal action at the May 7th Commission meeting. Thank you.
Are there any questions from the committee? Jeff,
No,
Being
none
that-
from me. Thank you.
could I get a motion to, in fact, recommend this forward to the full commission for action at our May 7th meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Probably moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion carries. We'll advance this to our full commission meeting.
Thank
Thank
you.
you all for the presentation.
Thank you.
There are no other items on the agenda for the Budget, Finance, and Audit Committee. So I will in fact announce that this meeting is adjourned effectively at 3:55 p.m.
Thank you.
Thank you.